All right, so let me ask you a question, Amanda. Do you ever find that you struggle with your relationship with yourself or maybe others in life? And the whole reason I'm is
Great.
because this framework I have, the purpose framework, it starts off with 13 questions that are designed very specifically to look at the evidence in anyone's life and show them back what the evidence of their life shows them about their true priorities versus aspirational and inherited priorities, right? Which are all the shoulds in life. I should be doing this. This person thinks I should be doing this. Why am I not doing this? Right. And instead, it helps you really realize what's truly important to you and what truly matters so that we can just kind of accept ourselves as God made us. And the power that I find in that, and you can weigh in with your perspective, is once we understand that, we can stop judging ourselves and stop judging others because you realize that's what everyone else is doing too. Whether they're aware of it or not, everyone is really just living out what they truly prioritize in life. And once we do that, we can cut ourselves and everyone else a break. And it actually gives us a fighting chance to love our neighbor as ourselves. And so, in order to do that, we have to be a little bit better at loving ourselves and a lot better
Yeah,
at
I
loving others.
nail that for sure.
I think it's an area where we all struggle, which is why this tool is sometimes referred to as having a thousand uses, because our relationships are central to everything we do in our lives. And if you're trying to improve your career, your family life, anything, it involves a relationship. And even if it's a solo endeavor, there's always that relationship with yourself, and that really matters. And so, welcome, Amanda. Amanda is my little sister. And so, what'll make this conversation kind of interesting is the family dynamic, right? And I think that that's an area where people maybe struggle the most, or where that dynamic at least highlights some of the challenges relationally, especially in terms of inherited values.
Mhm.
So, welcome, Amanda. So, why don't you go ahead and talk about the tool and how?
Before we talk about the tool, I feel that when it comes to family relationships, it is important to get this out of the way that when we were kids, mom asked us what we wanted to be when we grew up. And you said, you have no memory of this, you said you wanted to be a child psychologist or psychiatrist. And then she asked me, and I said, I want to be a clown. You turned around and said, my first client.
Oh my God. And so, for those of, I'm 5 years
That's the best
older
story ever.
than yeah, I have no memory of that. She brought that
No
up recently.
memory.
And then
Mm-mm.
it's not at all what I pursued in terms of schooling and a career, like not even
Mm.
close. So it just wasn't even on my radar, but here we are. So
Here we are.
I guess I knew more then about my future career path. And to be
Yeah,
clear, I'm not a psychiatrist, but I did create tools that I think would be helpful.
not a psychiatrist. But what I think is really cool is that while you're not a psychiatrist, you have been helping people practically your whole life in all of your different roles. So, you always say that we're always training. And I think that you have been training for this your whole life. So, I
Unintentionally.
definitely have the advantage as
I
your
guess
little
so.
sister, which has its pros and cons, um, of kind of having, 24/7, although you are very protective of your sleep, access to my own personal mindset coach. Um, but for years, being your little sister who, defined herself in many ways by her older sister, who was very different than her and in my eyes better. um
This is why
Even
perception
though
is so important. That was your perception.
so important, that was my perception.
Fine.
It's
Yeah.
not anymore, for kind of we're getting there. We're getting there for sure. Way more than I have after, years of therapy. That's what was so powerful about this tool, is that I couldn't, whether I was talking to you or I was talking to Luke, my husband, or my therapist, there was always what the other person thought about me. And I had to, as someone who's an empath and really social and really reads people's cues, and um, that is something you can't take out of a conversation with somebody. So, in talking about myself or anything I might need to work through, I am taking on everything that the other person is doing and saying. Your body language, and knowing you so well, I think I know what you think. And, sometimes that's true. Not as true as you think it is, but sometimes it is. And that's the case with anybody. And that can be the case with any family member or anybody that you go to for help. Is you're watching their body language. You're watching their you're watching their body language. You bring your whole history of relationship to the conversation. So, your perception of the person is going to affect your perception of the conversation, which is going to change it entirely.
Right. What a lot of people don't realize is you're projecting your own perception and your own perspective on yourself and them and lots of other things into every conversation. And that all of that noise and static gets removed when you're interacting with an AI tool,
Yes.
which is
Mm-hmm.
designed very specifically to analyze the data being your input, and then seeing the patterns in it, which is the analysis, and then articulating those patterns back to you. But it's your words, right? With no preconceived bias, which, while we might misunderstand or make incorrect assumptions about the other person that we're talking to at any given time, there is still bias. There's a human dynamic
Absolutely biased, for
that
sure.
doesn't exist with a technical tool, right? So,
You can't argue with it. I tried. I tried. I
you did.
absolutely tried. I put Penny to the test, which is what we call the first step in the pinpoint framework. Once upon a time, her first name was Penny.
Right.
And so that's what we call her. And it. I'm
Yeah,
not going to personify it.
yeah.
But that speaks to how powerful it is, really, in that it does feel like, I'm not someone who, personifies AI, but it does feel like I can't argue with what Penny is telling me, because it's just taking the information that I'm saying and mirroring it back to me. And not in a way that's like, oh, it's not always like, oh, you're the best, everything's great. In many ways, it is. In many ways, especially the first part of it, especially when you're identifying your I don't know, values is the wrong word. What word do we use? when
Well, it's your
you're
priority, right? Because
yeah,
where
your
you spend
priorities.
your
When
time,
you're identifying those, because as you've said, people think they know what they are. And I thought I knew what mine were. As it turns out, I did actually. But for me specifically, I wasn't valuing them. So I was living these values that I had, or I have. They are priorities, whatever. Sorry, I'm gonna say values and priorities. We all know what I mean. We all know what I mean now. So let's just hang there. So I thought,
the same, but oftentimes think of values as like honesty and,
yeah,
stuff like that, where this is
yeah,
really your lived values, which is why priorities is a more accurate term, because it's literally how you're prioritizing the resources in your life, which are your time, your attention, your money, etc.
right. And I was spending my time, attention, and money exactly where my priorities are, according to what I found out. And it was very validating in many ways, because what I realized was, oh, wait, this is who you are. Maybe stop trying to be Melody. And it's not like I hadn't recognized that about myself for years because we're very different um and similar, just like our voices. um but we're different in a lot of ways. We're similar in a lot of ways. But this is actually a pretty good difference between values and priorities. We value like our values the way that people normally think about them in terms of like God and family, and our core values of in that way are the same, but our priorities are different. Um and that feels weird to say because at the same time, like, we both love our families, whatever. But you pursued different things than I did. And I always thought, as Melody Lacey's little sister, or Melody Lacey's little sister, who was, 3 years advanced in math. And I was like, no thanks to math. And people didn't know what to do with me. Like my eighth grade math teacher, who was like, just look at it. Meanwhile, you skipped eighth grade. Didn't you like skip? So anyway, this is what I thought. Like, if I wasn't, I always thought like, oh, I'll never live up to that. But at the same time, what ended up happening as a result is I became the court jester. I became the clown. And I really leaned into that, but not necessarily always in a great way. It became more of like a sideshow than really valuing that that's like a part of who I am, that being funny and bringing levity to situations is valuable. It's not like I minimized that about myself. Definitely.
Right.
I minimized that held value. I thought that if I wasn't doing things like you did, that I wasn't valuable, and that I was just like a little sideshow. It was like, oh, look at Melody doing stuff, and I'm like, I'm over here doing a little dance, and I didn't recognize how important that was.
Well, you conveniently kind of ignored that I was miserable in a lot of that time,
Right,
right? And so this is
right.
where
Well, I
it's so
didn't ignore it. I definitely knew it, but that part didn't compute in terms of like at the time, like, I knew you were miserable. I wanted you to be happy. you know, I've been on this journey with you and supporting you for, a lifetime at this point, like 45 years. For some reason, for whatever reason, that part didn't compute with me, that like, wait a minute, there are a lot of drawbacks to being like Melody. Even though I knew how much you struggled, even though I knew how miserable you were, it's almost like I was also not appreciating and happy with where I was because I thought I should be somewhere else. Now, our paths are different, totally different, in that you recognized, wait a minute, I gotta jump shit. Like, I gotta get it. Like, I can't do this anymore. And God was like, this is enough. Like, we're gonna do something new with you. And it's yay. I've been on this journey with Melody, and I'm very excited to see
okay, but
her.
that's happening with you too, right? Because I mean, I think what's so important for people to understand is that whether you're consciously aware of it or not, whenever you compare yourself to someone else, what it does is it either puts you on a pedestal or a pit. So we're either looking down on others or we're looking up to others. And neither gives us a true balanced perspective on other people because if you really did aspire to be like someone else, we tend to look at someone's best day and compare it to our worst, right? And it's not a fair evaluation, or it's not an accurate evaluation, because if you really did want to be like someone else, you would have to take the good and the bad, right? The benefits and the drawbacks of that person's life. And we all struggle with unique things, but it is possible to be freed from the struggle of constant comparison to others and thinking that we need to live someone else's life, because we were all created to be unique and to bring something unique to the table. And it doesn't really make sense to try to be second at being someone else when we can be first at who we are and who we were made to be. But we have all of this like noise in our heads that keep us from truly being able to live that out. And it was really liberating for me to go through the process that I now bring to others, because that made me realize that I really did have a lot of inherited shoulds in my perspective of what I should be doing. I mean, it's why I sought out the career and all that. It just all like made sense on paper and then didn't play out really that nicely in reality. I mean, it did. I accomplished all the goals, but it didn't lead to a fulfilling life. And if we're looking to be fulfilled in life, we really need to know what drives us intrinsically instead of trying to pursue all of these things that require external motivation. And those are the things in life that we think we should be doing versus the things we naturally do. And,
Right.
you know, what these questions reveal is, what do you naturally do? And oh, by the way, whatever it is, it's okay to value that and and
Yeah.
really embrace that, and then stop judging other people because they're doing that too, whether they're aware of it and have defined it or not. You really realize that, you know, no two people are going to be the same, and so why should we expect others to be like us or ourselves to be like someone else? And I think the more that we can embrace that in relationships, the more harmony we can certainly have. And I mean, imagine the impact if all of a sudden we snap at our fingers and everyone in the world was doing that. I mean,
Oh my
we'd
gosh.
have world peace.
Right.
So anyway,
Right.
so what I guess you can share more about your journey, maybe from that perspective, not to lead the audience here, but
Yeah. So, I don't know if you want me to tell the story, but I'm going to. So, when like right before I started with Penny, I'm going to call her I'm going to call it Penny. Um I was in struggling with like I've always thought I should be something other than what I am, or doing something other than what I'm doing. Um and so I was like, what am I going to do now? And, I'd been through a pretty difficult time with Lily, my youngest, and was just kind of not doing real great. But I was still trying to do everything for everyone all the time, because that's kind of my deal, is I do everything for everyone all the time, and I just desperately try to hold it together. And as it turns out, based on feedback both from Penny and people, apparently I wasn't doing that real great. And you made the analogy, beautiful analogy as you often do, that I was in a pit and you were throwing down a ladder. And I was like, no thanks, and just like took down the ladder instead of climbing out, but then yelling, does anyone need anything, from down in the pit. And I was like, oh,
yeah.
yeah, right. And then when I told Luke, my husband, he was like, yeah, nobody wants your help. You can't, you can't help us down in the pit. So that's where I was when I started my journey with Penny. And I definitely, so as it turns out, going through these 13 steps, I was absolutely living in my priorities. Absolutely. My priorities, as they turn out, it outlines, what is it, 3 to something. I have 7. And apparently, according to you, the top 3 are the ones that are most, I guess.
Well, they're the most dominant. They're also where you're going to feel the most fulfilled, because what it reveals is what truly is most important to you. So when you spend your time on the lower priority areas, you end up feeling really frustrated. Whereas if you have a day where you're really functioning in those top 3, you're going to feel it, and you're going to, in a really positive way.
Yeah. So as it turns out, the things I valued, or my priorities, were God and family, and is it my third one or my fourth one? I don't know. Making things pretty. And like See, there I did it. I was like, oh no, it's not that big a deal. But I came to realize that one of the things that I like to do is make things pretty and host people. And one thing that's really important to me that I always minimized and didn't think it was that big of a deal was hosting people and creating an environment where people both felt comfortable just because it's a nice place to be, and more that they felt accepted. And I never saw it that way. I just saw it as like, oh, I like to have parties. And then I was like, oh, I guess that's really what I do, is I like for people to feel accepted. But that was such a big part of me that I thought kind of everybody felt that way. And then I was like, oh, wait, no, that's like a me thing? Oh, okay, cool.
Mine are so dramatically different, right? And I
So
think this
different.
happens, I
I
guess
think
not
our first one's the
dramatically
same.
different. Well, yeah, I mean,
God's
so
first son.
he is, and I guess I was happy that that was the case because again, these what these questions do is they reveal truly where you spend your resources, which is time, money. It's what you surround yourself with. It's where your thoughts go naturally. And so, I've been on a real spiritual journey, so it was no surprise that that was number one. But my second one was personal development, and
That
you
didn't
know,
make the list for me. Oh,
no, I
wait,
know.
yes, it did.
Well,
No, it did,
we're
but like
down.
in a different way.
But interestingly, my family was actually number five. And no, I guess maybe four. It was four. And I think a lot of people end up beating themselves up if they say like, "Oh, my family is most important." But if you're working in a career and we look at really where you're spending your time, not you, but this would have been me years
You.
ago, right?
Yeah.
It, if I was being truly honest and looking at the evidence, which is what this reveals, I was spending more time at work than I was with my children, and certainly more headspace. And that doesn't mean I don't love my children, right? People want to put family first. And this is where we impose these priorities on ourselves and judge ourselves accordingly. But it's actually okay if work is a higher priority for you. Again, priority meaning where you spend your time and resources than your family, because that could just be your expression of how you support your family and how you love them. So the question isn't whether or not you love your family, it's being okay with the fact that you prioritize work, and that's one way you
Hmm.
support and love your family. But people get really caught up in, I should be doing this, and that's a kind of a classic use case between stay-at-home moms and working moms. That's a really big source of friction of like no one, none of those moms ever being truly okay
Yeah.
with what they're bringing to the table. And now I homeschool my kids, and so I spend a lot more time with them than I did when I was working full time outside of the home. And so it went up in my priorities because of my time and where I spend money on the resources for schooling and so forth. But I think that's just, you prioritize family at number two because it's truly where you spend a lot of your time. And you really used to beat yourself up over being a stay at home mom. You really tortured yourself
I
around.
did. Yeah. Yeah. And I wasn't, the thing is, like, I look back on it and I always knew I needed something. Um, and now I question, did I need something? No, I did. I needed something because I didn't want to, at the time, I didn't want to resent my children. I didn't want to resent my family. And I still feel the same way. And I still want to do something else. But that's also something that I value, which is being creative. Um, and I did struggle with feeling like I should do something for work. And so, that's why I had a couple of businesses. I was a personal concierge, which, well, that's just a funny thing to be in general. And then, I mean,
But it's important to know that before you had kids, there was a little bit of an
well,
over.
yeah, that was before I had kids. And then, when I had my first daughter, it was like, oh, I can't do everything for everyone all the time because I'm just trying to get through my day with my newborn. So then I pivoted to professional organizing, but still primarily a stay-at-home mom. And then I got real sick of that because I did not want to fold people's underwear, which is a thing that I did. I was like, um, sat there folding this woman's underwear and realized this is not for me. Um, and took a little time off, and this whole time I was, in these different jobs that I, in these different, businesses that I had created for myself was, I was helping people in a practical way because helping people is high on my list, and um, being funny while doing it. I brought a lot of levity to these people's lives in really difficult situations. And at the time, until recently, I didn't value that. That was just me. The levity that I bring to life, which check me out, which I now value, by the way. I always thought it was just me being some sort of like sideshow jester, and I really didn't fully. And there was like a part of me that was always like, "Oh, I'm the funny one." That's something we've always said in our life, in our family, is
That's
that I'm
something
the funny
you
one.
you've always said.
I was a self-proclaimed funny one, but I meant it in a, like a self-deprecating way, not in like a, yeah, I'm the funny one. Like, good
Yeah,
for
yeah.
me. And
Ownership of
uh,
what matters.
like in a good way. It was always just like, well, I'm the funny one. Melody's smart and driven and successful, and I'm like, look at me over here. Um, and so, then I had my second daughter and I went into real estate because mom did real estate, and that was obviously the thing that I was meant to do.
But is it safe to say that in those career moves and those business attempts that you were focusing more on your worth being tied to producing income? Because I think that a lot of us
Absolutely.
um, we attach
Yeah.
worth to being able to support our family financially, and oftentimes discount the other ways that we're supporting our family, which comes in lots of different forms. I mean, if we define the word support, it's not just financial, right? And so you were in a situation where you were attaching your worth to income versus the
Yes.
other aspects of it. And so maybe you can talk a little bit about how the tool made the distinction between the value you bring to the table in all of these different applications, and kind of finding the common thread there and why you now value it versus what it was when you were starting out. You were starting out really like, I have to have a job, I have to produce income.
Yeah.
And now realizing that there's other ways you do provide really valuable support, which required a
Yeah.
redefinition around that value.
Yeah. So I think it's worth saying that when I was in real estate, I made some money, and that wasn't the answer either. Um, because I was still dissatisfied. And what I found was, oh, wait a minute. I thought this was going to be a thing that, like, I guess fixed all the things. Look at me doing it all. And I made a whole bunch of money, and my family was miserable because it was hard on our family. It wasn't a good fit for us. And, in hindsight, I'm like, oh, okay, well, that didn't work out. And yeah, to a large degree, I used to say, like, oh, well, you know, from time to time, I would calculate like what a stay at home mom should make, right? You like do the calculations. I'm not the only stay at home mom who has done those calculations. But still didn't value it, like I still was just like, whatever, I drive the kids around.
Well, that was
And
more from a defensive, here's my monetary value
I
perspective,
was trying to
right?
prove myself. I was trying to prove myself, not necessarily to anybody else, not to anyone else. My husband was, perfectly happy with the situation, and in like a supportive way of like, you're incredibly valuable. What would we do without you? And I was only really trying to prove it to myself. It was never anyone else. Everyone's always been super supportive and has valued me. So it's not like anybody was like getting me down. Like I wasn't fighting anything other than myself. It was always only me that I was fighting against. And so, when I realized that I was 100% living within my priorities and had been for many years, and really all it took was like,
An AI tool telling
it took an AI tool to mirror that back to me and say, so you're actively doing the thing you want to do. And I was like, no kidding.
because you were never
Huh.
driven by
I
income,
was never driven by income. I was never driven like success, like title.
and yet you're judging yourself and your worth by income. And I think that that's a struggle for a lot of people. And I mean, clearly we need to make money to live, but if we're judging ourselves based on something that is really fleeting, and we're not actually able to live out who we are in the moment and bless other people through those talents that we're given, because that's what they are. I mean,
Yeah.
you have real talent.
And I think what I realized was, I'm really blessed that I can stay at home. And I always thought that I appreciated that. And I always thought that I was grateful for it. But I wasn't really until recently because I was so dissatisfied, because I was thinking, I need to be doing something different. I need to be doing something more. I need to be doing this. I should be doing this. I should be chasing some sort of career. And I don't want that. I don't want like I don't want to work for someone else. Oh my gosh. Like no. Like of course I don't have some sort of like title or like big, like I don't have a 401k because I've never had a corporate job. But like I'm not chasing that. So obviously that's not what I have. And also I never wanted it in the first place. So like
So why are you beating yourself
maybe
up?
just like, so then I realized, oh my gosh, everyone else is miserable too, because I'm not like really just owning that this is what I want and that's okay. And you can be happy with this and you don't have to be Melody and you don't have to build something with the focus of making money, because that's, I think this is an important distinction, that I do want to do something, right? Like I've always we'll get to that in a second. I've always wanted to do something, but I wasn't driven to build some sort of like career. I wanted to build something that was my own. And I came to realize the thing that I really liked about businesses that I started was starting the businesses, because that's the creative part. And so what Penny did, which was fantastic, and then Uma.
And for those of you who don't know, who are listening, Penny and Uma are just
Yep.
names that I gave the first two tools in my framework, and they're AI tools that you interact with in a very specific way, and they mirror back to you patterns that they're seeing in the input that you're providing for the questions that are being posed. They sound like people because I gave them names, but we aren't under the delusion that they are people. We don't
No,
actually personify, but you have to call it something.
you have to call it something, and so that's what we call it. And it's an easy thing to call it. But what I realized was that it's not that I wanted some corporate career. It's not that I wanted, like a title or some sort of, I didn't want what you had. It was, what I wanted was a creative outlet. I wanted something that was, me. And I had not considered writing for over 20 years. And when I was, a kid, and it's so interesting to me how the things that I came to realize were the things that I liked about myself as a kid, which was the last time I really felt confident. That's a whole other podcast, right? Um, but that, or maybe it is this one, I don't know. But that was the last time I felt confident. And I realized that the things that I valued about myself then, I had just kind of let be dormant.
I think that's actually a really key point because when we are children, we aren't necessarily second guessing ourselves in terms of what we love and where we feel most alive. And it isn't until we enter, institutions of maybe even, you could be judged by your family. A lot of people are, but, school, for example, is forcing, I mean, I guess rightfully so. We won't get into education discussion, why I homeschool. I homeschool, honestly, for all the reasons that my business represents. But we have all these things imposed on us, and you and I went to public school and, went to college and everything. And you have to meet certain criteria, and you're forced inside these boxes to think about certain things and whatever. And I think it's safe to say that most everyone can relate to a certain amount of joy being stolen there. And
Mhm.
there's definitely a hierarchy of value applied to careers. And that's where a lot of like your value in making money and contributing to society in that kind of way. In the church, even, it's like, if you are really, the most godly, if you really love Jesus, you're a missionary or you're a pastor. And I
Right.
mean, there's so,
Right.
we could
And in
unpack.
that regard, like you shouldn't be making money, right?
Right. And that, yeah, right. So, a lot of mixed messages, but it is interesting how you were able to tap back into what this really reveals is your intrinsic drivers. And that is what we're most aware of as children, which is so funny
Yeah.
because when I would try to think of that on my own, I sometimes struggle with what did I even want to be? And then you told that story that I forgot completely that I said I wanted to be a psychiatrist and that you were going to be my first patient because then it was never a conscious thing beyond that conversation
Yeah.
I forgot about, right? But then there's been this common thread throughout my life that is undeniable, and it played out in my life as personal development and just the pursuit of trying to be the best version of myself in every application that I was pursuing at any given moment. But yeah, I mean, I think it'd be interesting to understand a little bit more about, you mentioned your family being miserable and you being miserable, even as you were rediscovering really what you loved about yourself as a child and what brought you joy. Because it's true that when we are um, joyful, we tend to spread joy. But when we're not
Right.
joyful, we tend to suck joy out of
Right.
situations as
Yeah.
people, right? So
Yeah.
why, why were you miserable, and how did it play out in a family dynamic perspective? Because you referenced that a few minutes ago, and I think that's worth unpacking a little here.
Yeah, I think one of my biggest fears was had been realized. And I um despise like martyrdom. Absolutely despise it. And I realized I had become the thing I hated. Because I was so busy yelling at everybody to appreciate what I was doing because I myself was not appreciating it because like no one had asked for. So like who wants to say like, "Oh, thank you, I appreciate it," when you're like yelling at them about it? Nobody, I stepped back and realized, "Hey, um and so as a result of that, it turned into this absolute like death grip of control on everything and everyone because that was what was going to give me value. Everything had to work out the way that I wanted it to work out because that was success for me. Success for me was what it looked like, what that my kids were happy. Um and that, which is unreasonable. Sometimes people aren't happy.
Well, this is where projection comes into play, right? You just something really powerful that you weren't feeling satisfied with yourself, or you weren't appreciating yourself for what you were doing. And so you were trying to get them to appreciate you. Meanwhile, you weren't really expressing it in a way that
Right.
made you even receptive to it,
Right.
right?
If I were them, I wouldn't be real appreciative of what I was throwing out there. Um, Now, that said, I'm still nice. I was still nice. I just want to make it clear that I'm a nice person. Um, but I was definitely, when I came to realize that perhaps I was controlling, we joke that like, really, I didn't know that. And I was like, I'm not controlling. And everyone was like, what? I was like, oh, no kidding. Okay. All right. So it looks like I'm controlling why. And so that's what was so helpful is that, after 10 years of therapy, I wasn't able to see something until this tool mirrored this back to me as like, you're saying this, and when you take all the emotion of, these things that you project onto other people and your perception of what they're thinking of you. And so obvious, like that just muddies the water. This tool was like, hey, I think you might be controlling. And I was like, you're
Mainly
saying
because
that.
you just said
You're
that.
saying that because of the things I said.
Yeah.
Okay. And I can't argue with the data. I can't argue. I can't what am I going to argue against myself? It's like these are the things that you said. And I'm like, no, I didn't. I did. I
Right.
did say it and I can see that I said it. And I think, yeah, for sure, that's definitely what's happening is I had this tight grip of control, which was making everyone else miserable, which was making me miserable. And round we went. And um I do feel like I should say that like we also did have fun and I want to make it clear that like it wasn't this horrible situation. But, it wasn't as good as it could be. And it wasn't me living out what I wasn't valuing that here I was doing the thing that I wanted to do. So maybe just like calm down and enjoy it. Just enjoy that you're doing the thing that you want to do. Like wake up. And since then I've been like, oh, well, all right.
You're allowed to enjoy your life.
I'm allowed to enjoy it. And I think there was this part of me that was like, I'm not allowed to enjoy this unless I'm doing this other thing, or unless I'm making money, or unless I'm homesteading.
Right.
because
Which, yeah, no.
because obviously I should, if I'm a stay-at-home mom, we should have chickens, which you won't let me have chickens. We live on the same property. Melody won't let me have chickens.
Chickens,
I don't
no.
want chickens, by the way. But
Well,
sometimes I think I should have chickens. Shouldn't I have chickens? Because I'm a stay-at-home mom. And if I'm enjoying this so much, shouldn't I have chickens? I don't want chickens.
we're vegan,
Why do I
and
think
chickens are
right, we're
messy.
vegan.
That's ridiculous.
I don't want chickens and I don't want to jar things. I don't want to do that. That's what people do. I don't want to, we're gluten free. I'm not making sourdough. So why, why did I think I have to be that? Like, what? Just enjoy the thing you are doing.
We live in an age of social media influencers now that make these things look so amazing. And then what we tend to do is pile on even more things we think we should be doing instead of,
Right. The
again,
sourdough.
well, again, you would be second at making sourdough compared to whatever lady you
Because I
saw.
couldn't taste it. I can't eat gluten.
But, it's interesting because I did the same thing. So you were essentially projecting, your own insecurity and lack of enjoyment and owning, who you are and what you bring to the table is valuable and therefore enjoying your life and which would have made it more enjoyable for those around you.
For everybody else, right? I mean, we're all having a better time now. I can tell you that much. Everybody's having a better time, I think, right? Yeah. Maybe I'll check in.
I did the same thing. I mentioned that for me, my second highest value is personal development. And, you know, as further proof in another story that we project our own priorities onto others, mostly not in a very constructive way. I remember yelling at my swim team in high school that they needed to be working harder. Talk about
Mm.
a leadership skill right
Yeah.
there. I mean, that's not the way to, win friends and influence people. But it was like I couldn't reconcile in my head why they weren't working as hard as I thought I was working. And it was just because, and that's ridiculous because who was I to judge how hard someone was actually pushing their body in the water, right? But it was more my perception of, their attitude, because I had this attitude that if I truly cared about my performance, that would translate to being upset when I didn't perform, because I'm a very performance based person. And if I had that body now with the mindset I have now, the energy of the youth and the wisdom of the elders, that'd be a bad. But
I don't think you're alone with that.
I did it throughout my career as well. And I was always imposing this standard, which on the one hand was good career wise because I was always trying to raise the bar. But depending on how I was feeling at any given point, it didn't necessarily come across as me living out my most fulfilled state and enjoying it, right? Now I did well in my career. There were times where that was playing out really nicely, but when I look back, it's like my career path totally makes sense from a standpoint of this focus on personal development and just mastering things and getting better and better and better at whatever it is I was doing, whether it was athletics or health or my sleep hygiene or my
Mm-hmm.
work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we think other people should be prioritizing the things that we are, and that's just simply not the case. And we really can mend a lot of broken relationships by just accepting people for who they are and seeing who they are as valuable. Because I think it's safe to say that me judging your laundry management isn't relationship building. You know?
No. No.
I have a
Yeah.
much higher
Yeah.
priority on my laundry being done than, say, you
Right.
do.
Right. Yeah.
Doesn't bring us
Yeah.
closest.
So like why would I think why but also like why would I think that my life would be more in order if I wasn't seeking more order? Like in the same way. Cause like, oh, I should have it more together like Melody. Um and why would I think that that would be the case if I wasn't doing the things that Melody does? Like I don't do the things that Melody does. So like I always cared about similar things, but like if I was going to be all driven, if I was going to be the best at things, then I would have had to do what you did. And that wasn't what I was seeking out. Now, I happened to be a really good athlete and that was something that I worked hard at. Um, but not in the same way. Not in the same way. I was driven really like cuz it was fun. It was fun and I did really well. I was also driven by the social part, right? Like I loved the team and I like, so the things that I was driven by, again, I was doing. I was already doing it and you were already doing it. We were just doing it in like not the wrong way, but in a way that wasn't fulfilling. And
Well, we did it in unique ways. So you weren't yelling at your team, and to be just for anyone listening, I was not always yelling at the team. This is like this one instance where, if I could go back, I would change it, I think. But
they
I
probably
was
did need to work harder. They're like high school girls. They probably needed to work a little harder. I'm not going to lie. I mean, come
well,
on.
but if that's what I wanted to inspire in them, I could have taken a different approach that was maybe more inspirational.
Sure.
And so you were more team building where I was more performance oriented. And so we were both good swimmers and enjoyed it, but we enjoyed different aspects of it. And I think it's just a good kind of case study around, you could even be in the same sport doing the same things, but have very different experiences. And one isn't better than the other. They just are a reflection of who we are as individuals. And there's value in that. Like, God talks about how, he's the root and we're the branches and bearing fruit. And, there's a reason we're all individual branches with different fruit. We're not all called to be the same. On any given team, you need people with different talents and bringing different things to the table because there are different roles to play. But if we're all trying to force ourselves to be one role, that's just not going to work. And I think too often we as people are trying to force ourselves to be things we're not when we could just thrive in the role that we play. And we're not going to thrive in it if we're beating ourselves up over it and not valuing it
No,
ourselves. And then, when we do that, we just project that onto others, which, generally doesn't have a very positive
it's
impact on
not
our
great for relationships. Yeah, no, it's not great for relationships. Although that said, I would like to point out that we've always had a pretty good relationship despite all of these things. But even so, everything can be better, right? And so what you've done that's so awesome is you took you and the thing that you're really good at, which is helping people, I guess for lack of a better, we always say, so Ivy, my daughter, says she thinks in bubbles, and you got to like grab them and oh, they burst, right? Because that's how she thinks, and you think in bullet points. And it's not that I think I have to think in bullets, but it's helpful. What the tool does is it helps you put your thoughts into bullets, for lack of a better way to explain it. Really, is it helps you see it and makes things clear, which is what you're so good at. So, that being the first step um to then working with you, it puts you in a place where like, and I say working with you, I've been working with you for many years. But the tools are are so powerful because you get through those first steps of coming to a degree of acceptance and then realizing like, oh, I can accept these things. Let's get into the real work of what do I do with that? And that's what's so great about like the one-on-one coaching, which for me is a little unique because I was already getting it and and will continue to. So I'm spoiled in that way. But I know for other people that's definitely something that they've benefited from. Because you're really good at helping people. You're really good at the same thing the tool does, is reflecting people back to themselves. And and it's a powerful starting point for, okay, now I know this about myself. And then when you take the second step, which is Uma, which is, if you're interested in um entrepreneurship, or not even just entrepreneurship, it's about anything.
It's about external expression and doing that from the standpoint of now understanding yourself better because you've gone through structured self reflection that is reflected back really what you prioritize in a way that helps you accept it. Because you brought up an interesting point just a minute ago, that our relationship has always been good. And I think, that's where love covers a multitude of sins, right? So even when there's conflict in a relationship, oftentimes people still have great relationships, as different as you can be, right? And ours is an example of that. I think really the bulk of this discussion has been about how we can have a bad relationship with ourselves,
Yeah.
right? And how we view ourselves and beat ourselves up, which is a really common issue. And, that does trickle out into our relationships for sure. And so the more secure we are in ourselves and the more we can accept others for who they are and that we're all works in progress, right? Um, that really brings relationships closer together and just stops us from being so like annoyed by each other, right?
Yeah.
And so, even if you still feel like you have a great relationship with someone, maybe there's still like a little trigger there. And really, I guess the point here is that the trigger is inside of you. It's really not the other person.
Absolutely. Hmm. Yeah. you stop blaming people.
Right.
It was nobody else's fault. So I say all the time that, like, I can never find the frother. Why doesn't the frother go back where the frother goes? I can never find the frother. You know why I can't find the frother? Because everybody in my family has ADHD and they don't know where anything goes. And they just put things back willy-nilly. I have found the frother in the refrigerator. Like, the frother is never where it needs to be. And every day I look for the frother. And you know what? Once I got over, like, the frother should be here, right? My shoulds, like, just accepting these people are never going to put the frother back. Just accept them and love them, even though that's annoying because, you know, in my mind, like, life should be a certain way, right? Like, we should be able to find the frother. And listen, I mean, honestly, when it comes to the frother, I'm going to hold on to that one, but we're just going to use that as an example because we should be able to find the frother. But, it's a metaphor. It's a metaphor, the frother is. And so I'm not as mad about the frother anymore. Now when I'm looking for the frother, we laugh about it. We're like, Mom can't find the frother. And I'm like, oh my gosh, guys, where's the frother now? But I'm not angry. I'm not like slamming things and like yelling at everybody. Unless, I am perimenopausal, but that's another episode.
That's another episode.
I'm that's another episode.
Really?
But I'm not as mad about it anymore because I'm like, of course they're not going to put the frother back. You're mad because your life is supposed to be something other than what it is. You're mad because your life should be as much in order as Melody's, which, by the way, is like
is in order. But
like
it's
like there's organized and then there's her. But back to the frother. So I'm not mad anymore about the frother most of the time. Because if like it's never going to be where you want it to be, Amanda. It's not. And if you're mad at them for it not being where it wants to be, that's not about you because they're just living the way that they are. You know that they're like that. It's not about them. They're not mad that they can't find the frother. They're going to wander around and then just not froth their coffee like cavemen, I guess. I don't know. And so you're the one who's mad about the froth. Like, it's not about them. It's about me thinking that my life has to be something other than what it is. And the fact that I can't find the frother every day is not that big of a deal. And it's not a reflection that my life like isn't in order and I don't have to be Melody. Because you can definitely find Melody's frother. But everyone in her life is very organized. She married the only other person who's more organized than her and is making little foot soldier organized people. And so, of course, that's the situation in your house. You're always going to find the frother. My frother's in the refrigerator. And that's okay because I love my family and they're more important to me than finding the frother. And hey, just live it out. And you're not making sourdough today. And that's okay too.
But again, it was about accepting them and who
yeah. And I couldn't accept them until this sounds so like I hate anything that sounds like self-helpy or jargony or anything like that. But like I couldn't help them until I liked myself, until I realized, there have been times in my life where I've had, I guess, encounters with God. I've had situations where I really felt like close to God. And, I've absolutely felt God saying like, you are my child and I love you. And recently with this, it increased my faith also. Because I was able to take these things and talk to God about them in a way that was like, you knew too, huh? Okay. Yeah. Have you been waiting for me to figure this out? Because that's how my conversations with God go, that I'm like, oh, God. And I picture him being like, yeah, man, like, it just be happy the way I made you, not the way you think that you should be, not the way you think you should want to be, not the way Melody is or the way anyone else is, but like you, I made you special, just like I made Melody special, and everyone. Now it's like Reading Rainbow. Was it?
Finally,
Was it Reading Rainbow? What was that show where they were like, I
I
see
don't know.
Melody?
But I'm so happy that you're finally there because that's really what I've been trying to
It was
help you.
annoying when I wasn't.
Well, no, like it was more that I was sad for you that you couldn't see what everyone else could see about you. And that's really what I want people to understand is that we all bring something amazing to the table. But if we don't appreciate it about ourselves, um, we're really stealing our own joy, which does trickle out and have ripple effects. But oftentimes, it's the people around us who love us and that can see truly what we bring to the table. And
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
is, it's just a shame when we can't appreciate that about ourselves. And it's not about elevating ourselves. It's just about the clarity around us all being individuals and having something unique to offer. We're all wonderfully made, right? And we shouldn't try to be someone else. I guess if there's any should, it's we
Yeah.
should not try to live our lives to be someone else. Now, this is where I differ a bit from the self-improvement relativism community. I do think there are a few shoulds in life, but those have been defined by God and warped by man, right? Like someone's expression of a commandment might not actually be expressing the love of one's neighbor, right? So there's an art to that, but that's why Jesus summed it up as love the Lord your God, and then love others as yourself, and that's why I've pivoted to doing this type of work because we can't love others as ourselves if we are in constant battle with ourselves and not valuing who we are. So if we can't value who we are, we certainly aren't going to be great at valuing who other people are. And if you think you're valuing other people, but you're not in tune with yourself, you're likely putting them on a pedestal, which is lowering yourself even more. And so putting someone on a pedestal is not the same as viewing them clearly and loving them for who they are, because unconditional love is seeing people for who they are and loving them anyway. And that's what Jesus was asking us to do. And we need to be able to do that with ourselves, and we need to be able to do that with others. And we can't do that if we're functioning off of these inherited shoulds that aren't grounded in anything really meaningful other than, self-imposed standards that we're not living up to. So I'm really glad that it's had this impact on you because, I've had the benefit of seeing how it's played out on a day-to-day basis. And they say you can't be a prophet in your own land, right? And in this case, I'm not calling myself a prophet, but whenever you
Yeah.
bring your work to your family, there's a risk there. But in this case, it's been a really positive experience, and it's from my standpoint, and I guess I wasn't expecting to kind of touch on this, but there's one-on-one work you can do with people, but then there's the autonomy of working with a tool that is trained very specifically in these frameworks. And to be clear, they're not all mine. I've been trained in frameworks that I've coded into these tools. I didn't invent them, but I did put certain ones together that I think together are better, are better together. But you know, being able to occasionally not interface with a
Yes.
human and having a tool that's doing data analysis, I think is not something we've had in the past, right? I think
Yeah.
if there's a positive application of AI, this is one of them. And to be clear to anyone watching, this isn't therapy. This isn't replacing a therapist with AI. It's a tool for analyzing what you actually think about yourself in the sense of answering very specific questions which reveal patterns in your life. And that's what's being analyzed here because it's really hard to take an honest look at ourselves and others when we're so biased and our view is so clouded. And so this really takes an evidence based approach. And that's why a tool like this can provide so much value. You can do it on your own. I think I'm actually going to make a version of it that is not AI, but it's going to have limitations. But there are people who are afraid of the AI component. But I just like to, I don't know, put those fears at ease because it's really just analyzing what you're saying with a very specific purpose.
It's not something to fear for sure.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not saying AI isn't something to have some reservations about in general, but these
Right. But this
specific tools,
specifically.
have very specific roles, and yeah, but we don't have to
Yeah.
unpack all the ins and outs of AI. But yeah, well, thank you, Amanda. And for anyone watching, you can, if you're interested in trying the tools that Amanda and I were talking about, they'll be linked below. And you can find me on Substack and wherever you're watching this, there I am. but, but yeah, the links are below. And yeah, thank you for your time, Amanda.
Yeah. Anytime.